And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Sally Ranney, who's the co-founder and president of AREI and ARDE. And she's also the co-founder of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, We Can, and CEO of Stillwater Preservation, LLC. Let's welcome Sally Ranney.
Okay, so first of all, as president, I want to welcome you all here and thank you so much for coming on such a beautiful day, beautiful days that we're going to have this week, to learn as much as you can and take it home to your organizations and to your networks. We really appreciate it very, very much. So we are one in trillions. And we're called planet Earth, but we really should be called the planet of waters. 71% of the planet is water, covered by water, the oceans. And it's really a miracle that we're here at all. And we were born, humanity was born in the womb of creation. And we have this original knowing. And it's no accident that all of you are here now, at this moment in time, because there are big shifts. We are presence, we have a presence in the future now, right now. And we're made of all the same stuff as the trees and the great oceans, vast oceans that provide every third breath that we take, and the life-giving fresh waters and the springs and the ice fields. We're the same stuff as the bees. We have patterns in our DNA. We're just arranged differently. And Nikola Tesla tells us that we are of the same frequencies. Everything is energy. That we are the same frequencies as the Earth. In nature, everything has a purpose. There is precision in function. There's the deceptively strong and the oh so fragile. And evolution is a very tricky thing. And that's why it's a miracle that we are here. The point is, we are not separate from nature. We are hopelessly and eternally held in the all of creation, in the web of life, of everything that is manifest and everything that is yet to be manifested. That gives us tremendous power in choice and responsibility. So we have forgotten our connection, and part of that is culture and education and distraction and noise. So we've been looking through a lens of false assumptions. And it has created a very dangerous illusion. And these false assumptions are fear-based. And the narrative that accompanies that plays out in our politics, the way we treat each other, and the major dilemmas that we have on the planet. So these assumptions include separateness. I am separate from you. I am separate from nature. I am separate from others. Competition. Competition is the key to success and survival. and scarcity. I have to get mine before somebody else gets it. There's not enough. And what this has done is we've turned our back on our own true nature. And what has this produced? What has this fear-based consciousness of separateness, competition, and scarcity produced? And we know that sustainability cannot endure if there's not lasting peace. They go together like this. So we get out of this fear base, we get war and racial genocide and violence and inequity, terrorism, radical fundamentalism, poverty, the suppression of the divine feminine in both males and females. But it is going to rise. It is rising. Competition, we're taught competition constantly. In our schools, in our education process, they're asking us, what job do you want? How are you going to do that? Well, I have to compete. I have to compete. I learned as a child, spending much of my time in nature and the fields across from my house, because I walked out of church at 7 and said I wanted to be with God. And my mother never made me go back. So when everyone was in church, I was there with the trees and the birds and the sky and the worms in the sand and watching everything cooperate with everything else. So I learned that the master impulse of the universe is cooperation. It's not competition. And if anyone is going around in their head right now and asking themselves that question, you can talk to me afterwards about wolves and bison and beaver and elk. And I can explain this to you. So we did not cooperate with nature, but rather the narrative of fear and separation and competition led us to degrading it, vast degradations. Those were the tar sands. These are the tar sands. And we were rapacious for resources. And there have been massive extinctions due to humans, not the ones in the past, the ones in the last 100 years. There are 1,000 times more extinctions now than before humankind. There were 60 million passenger pigeons in this country. We shot them all except one, Martha. She died on August 29, 1914. This is the golden toad. It was discovered in 1966 and extinct in 1989 because of loss of habitat and potentially climate change and not enough moisture in the rainforest. And this is the vaquita, which is a porpoise, one of the 128 mammals living in the ocean. And when they originally did the counts, there were 600. Then a few years later, I think it was about 4 years later, they counted again. There were 200. They counted in 2014, there were 60, and now there are 30. Trawling nets, bycatch, which is what this one is in. 75 meters long, dragging the bottom of the ocean. These are in the Gulf of Mexico. So when you abandon your true nature, it's really easy to fall into the money pit. And it's bottomless. And it's also has taken over not only our democracy, but other democracies. And they are failing, as Maggie said. And the reason this man was voted into office is because of the fear-based consciousness. They wanted an ideology to control and dominate. And so it is that consciousness fully playing out. And shopping, that's another way to fill the void if you've turned your back on your true nature. Did you know that in America that an average child will have 238 toys by the time they're 9, and they will play with only 12 of them? So guess where they go? And there's one study, and this is really hard for me to believe, that an average American woman can spend as many as 8 years of her life shopping. And so it's created our pollutions. Plastic in the ocean, for one. By 2030, there'll be more tons of plastic in the ocean than there are fish. And coral reef disruption and death. 50% at this moment. That's where all the fisheries, that's where the wealth of biodiversity is in the ocean. And we've already lost 2% of our capability of the ocean has lost 2% of its capability to create oxygen. So there was a mention, I think it was John Powers, about population. So when you're separate from nature, the stabilization of population isn't even on the radar anymore, except for a few organizations. Now, that last one was the Nigerian capital. Average woman has 6 children. And this is Mexico City. 24,400 square miles of waves of humanity that have succumbed every other living thing. And here's LA. Suburbia was advertised as absolutely nirvana after World War II. And of course, we'd already started with the automobile, and we became an automobile-dependent culture. It was inevitable. And so this is what we're starting to see now. Because there are so many vehicles, and mass transit is not where it should be. Now, the reason I'm showing you all this is to set the context for the change of consciousness. So the most daunting thing that we have created, we've created all of this, we are co-creators, is climate change. And we know about the melting of the Arctic and the ice sheets coming off of the Antarctic. And with 2 meters of sea rise, this is Manhattan. We've had epic floods, 1,000-year floods. There were 7 here in the United States since 2000. China in 2011 had one of the worst droughts that they can remember. It cost over $1.5 billion, and it affected 7 provinces. And of course, wildfires, because things are warmer and drier. We're devouring the earth because of the fear-based consciousness. Competition, separation, and scarcity. And so this is a climate model that came out of, I can't tell you the university, I forgot, I'm sorry. But the Earth is not too big to fail, is the point. But now something's happening. Something's happening. There's a new C-suite on the planet emerging. And it's called carbon, climate, and consciousness. It's a triple nexus. And the first two C's of this new C-suite are symptoms. Carbon and climate are symptoms. The third C, consciousness, is the cause. So we have looked at the pieces of the puzzle. And so there is a glimpse of this new consciousness trying to emerge. And these are some of the big ideas. The sustainability goals. Half Earth. Nature needs half. The Paris Agreement, which our president has dropped out of, but nobody else has. It took 30 years to negotiate this, when it really, in a different consciousness, would have taken maybe 5, because it is complex. But there was a lot of fear that one country would do something and another one wouldn't, and we'd be behind because we wouldn't have the competitive advantage, et cetera, et cetera. But a really good idea. And the Oceans Conference, the UN Ocean Conference, which I just came back from, hopefully there will be an accord coming out of the UN with all countries on the oceans, and hopefully in less than 5 years. We're starting to communicate differently, visually. Because the way we frame words, and Maggie touched on this, it's not the words that make the narrative, it's how we frame the words, how the brain works in framing words. If I say to you, if I say chair, you see a chair. It can be one of these chairs, it can be a lazy boy, it can be any kind of chair. If I say furniture, it gets messy, because then it could be anything. So being the precision of language, of the narrative, and the storytelling is critical. And also the visual aspects of that communication. The roadmap. President Olafur Grimsson. This is a fabulous piece of work on how the world actually can really deal, and it comes from a different consciousness, can deal with climate change collectively. And he was our keynote speaker last year. He's no longer the president, but he is one of the global leaders on climate change now. And we march, and resistance, which is absolutely necessary, and we vote, but we voted this time out of fear consciousness. What do I get? What do I get? I get jobs, maybe, because I'm really afraid of not having a job. And so the ancients have been telling us, been trying to tell us for a long time, that everything is consciousness, animate and inanimate. And now physics confirms that. And we are all one. We are not separated from anything. And that is a really important level of human consciousness evolution that we need to get to if we're going to survive and not take everything with us. And the reason is that the reason this has been this way is because separateness is differentiated consciousness. The oneness is undifferentiated, unconditional consciousness. This is from the work of Andrew Bailey and Connie Marlowe Baxter, friends of mine. And they have done a lot of deep work on this subject over many years. And we've also been told by our contemporaries the same thing. So we're being invited. We've been invited for quite a while now to shift at a very deep, profound level. Because we'll be doing the same things wrapped in different packages, different energy regimes, if we don't go to the root cause. And it's an invitation. No, you don't have to do it. It's an invitation. And this is what climate change has done. We created it, and possibly it has given us the opportunity to make a huge leap, because we are being asked to collaborate at a level never before in human history. We are being asked to see ourselves as one humanity, one with the earth and her systems. And so it can be done. It can be done. But it takes looking at two things. What is consciousness? And how do you deal with the old assumptions? So consciousness, for practical purposes, which Connie and Andrew defined, is awareness, assumption, attitude, attention, alignment, action, and allowing. So when the convergence of the C-suite, the new C-suite of climate, carbon, and consciousness is upon us, it's like lightning striking in the same place 3 times. This is not a wake-up call. This is the wake-up call. And you are here now. All of you are going to make and are making such a huge difference. Huge difference. It's also going to require an integration of the male and female balance, which has been out of balance for so long. And that's not an easy thing. That has to be thought about. That have to dive deep into these questions, these issues, to shift the world and shift how we make decisions. And it's important to regard all life with respect and dignity and kindness and in no harm, absolutely as much as possible, unless you take one for food. You don't take their habitat. You take their habitat, that will be your future as well. What happens to them happens to us. So what's the to-do list? Commit to a courageous and a tenacious navigation through those assumptions. Dissemble the assumptions and their resulting belief systems and their consequential behavior. Understand that life, the diversity of life on this planet is unfathomable. And the stewardship responsibility that we have, because we are beings that are all of what is manifest and what is to be manifested, is remarkable power. Think about that for a minute. Think about that. And there's a little twist here as well. The antidote, there's so much outrageous pain in the world. Do you know what the antidote is? Outrageous love. And so act from that place. And the work that you do, actually, if you step back, is probably outrageous love for life, for the planet. So the new narratives, the new paradigm, if we take care of nature, nature takes care of us. This is an intimate, living conversation every day with nature. The narrative, the words that have gone with the old narrative have been destroy, deplete, get what I want, make it profitable. Usually it's on a short time frame, and nature is long time frame. The new narrative comes through as replenish, restore, respect all living things and yourself on the planet. These are living conversations. This is not an inanimate intellectual exercise. This is the real thing. But if you're not connected, if you haven't done the work, there's lots of levels and definitions of the work, but I'm talking about evolving your consciousness. For the first time, because of what we know now, we can consciously accelerate our human consciousness evolution. That is also tremendous power. And so these living conversations are extremely important and should be extremely respectful. And collaboration is the new competition. And we have a responsibility for those that come after us, and to understand and respect the intergenerational responsibilities that we have. And so if we can move into this evolution of ourselves, because now we can see the contrast between what is, what has been, and what the future needs to be. The future that we want it to be. And all stakeholders, every being on the planet is a shareholder and a stakeholder now. Every single one. And so that is the way it is and the way it can be. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.